Hey everybody, welcome back to Winnemac Hockey. In today's video, we are going to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks and their current situation. Let's hop into the video. All right, everybody, right before we get started here, as we record this, we are only 13 subscribers away from hitting our goal of 300. So please consider subscribing. And as always, we thank you for your support. All right, so the Chicago Blackhawks are an interesting team and a fan favorite of ours. Can't tell, not Jake, but me and Matt, yes. So we're excited to talk about this video. The main topics including the Alex DeBrincat trade rumors and season recap, offseason analysis, and more. So, guys, let's start with the season recap. The Chicago Blackhawks finished with a poor record of 28, 42, and 12. Good for 68 points and a minus 72 goal differential. This is a team that had Marc-Andre Fleury for most of the season, acquired Seth Jones, and honestly, people expected more out of them, and they just did not perform. And now there's rumors that Alex DeBrincat is going to be traded. So it has been a whirlwind for Chicago fans. The good news is Chicago has 18 mil in projected cap space. However, there's 5 mil sitting on LTIR. So keep that in mind. But there's room to work with here. And the Toews and Kane contracts will run out in exactly 1 year. So that will also open up some cap space. So, fellas, what did you think of Chicago's season overall? And Matt, I'll start with you since we'll start with a little bit of a biased opinion here.
Well, I don't know how biased it is because I thought the season was awful. When you're looking back at it, I think the coaching situation was bad from the get-go. Obviously, you start off with a huge losing streak start the year. I think it was 0-9-2, maybe 0-9-1 starting off, and then the coach is just gone. So you make all those acquisitions before the beginning of the season, bringing a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, bringing in a guy like Seth Jones, and getting him an extension. You think the team's going to look better, and you were hoping for a better bounce back from a guy like Jonathan Toews. Yeah, it was going to take him a little bit, obviously, coming back from an illness like that to get back into form, but it took him way longer than I thought a lot of people expected it to. And that really hurt the team that didn't have much center depth to begin with. So the fact that they couldn't rely on him hurt. And then you bring up your AHL coach, the coach for the rest of the season, who was okay at the beginning, but I think his message kind of waned as the season went on, and the team kind of just floated about and just started losing games towards the deadline, and that just gave them ammo to move off some pieces like a guy like Hagel. And it just at some point the scoring wasn't there, which is weird to say with a team like this who has prolific goal scorers like King and DeBrincat and Strome coming back, who was the guy who was scratched at the beginning of the year, but once he was put on this line, he played well. But outside of those three guys, they didn't get much, and that was the big problem with this team. And goaltending after Fleury did end up getting traded, and even when he wasn't in the lineup, was suspect at best. Kevin Lankinen playing not nearly as good as he did last year really hurt them. And yeah, they have a lot of issues and a lot of holes going into next season.
Yeah, for sure. Jake, as an outsider who is not a Chicago fan, what did you think of the team and what direction do you think they might need to go?
Yeah, as a Blues fan, I've got to say, boo! Also, I liked Kevin Lankinen 2 years ago, and I think it was a mistake to bring in Fleury. I think the fans might have liked it, but as a young goalie who had a pretty good season and the team goes out and replaces you, I think that's a big strike to your confidence. And now he's going into free agency, and he might remember that. So, especially as a UFA. So I think they could have some questions in goal. I know you guys didn't really like the performance this year in general from him, so maybe you're okay with him leaving. But I think there are some huge questions all over that team. Why are you trading the people that you're trading? Why are you keeping the people that you're keeping? I have no idea what direction they're going in.
Yeah, I think that a DeBrincat trade rumors are specifically what everyone's confused about. They want more assets, but if you're rebuilding, you look for a star to build around. And DeBrincat is a young superstar in this league. So the fact that he's even having calls made for him is kind of concerning as a Hawks fan, because it's like, what more do you want? What superstar are you looking for to build around? Because Kane's not getting any younger. So So yeah, let's talk about some of the trades too that Chicago made because they don't have a first round pick this year. They traded Brandon Hagel, they traded Marc-Andre Fleury. Jake, I'll come back to you. Those were good trades for the Hawks, right?
Yeah, I'll say again, I don't like the Flurry trade. I don't think it was necessary because I don't think that goaltending was the problem. I think it's been a depth problem. I think that fans might have gotten a little ahead of the jump this season with, oh, well, we're getting Flurry and Taze is coming back. We're going to win the cup or we're going to make the playoffs. And I think that was a bit premature. I think it was probably very exciting for you guys, but I don't think the team was ready for those moves. And I think it just ultimately hurt the rebuild, which they ended up with a pretty good draft pick anyways. I think adding Seth Jones was a good move. And I do think it hurt them to lose Duncan Keith, though. I know he's old, but you look, he stepped into an Edmonton team. And I don't know if it's the locker room presence or whatever he has going on. And I know Edmonton fans also complained about him, but he's doing something right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Matt, what do you think overall, looking back on the Seth Jones trade? And I know that you're a big Brandon Hagel fan. So what were your thoughts with him going to Tampa?
It sucked. I think a lot agreeing with what Jake said. It was really just a kind of a situation where it's like that's another young piece that you can build around on an amazing contract. So getting rid of him didn't really make sense. Like if they were going to really trade anybody at the deadline, it should have been one of the defense like Calvin Don or the Jake McCabe or somebody like that. Off some of those guys with a bigger contract. But you have a guy who's on the cheap, like I think it's 1.5 for the next 2 or so years, 3 or so years, in Brandon Hagel, and getting paid nothing, and he's giving you amazing production, over 20 goals at the deadline. So I mean, like this is a guy who we were talking about that scoring issues they have. One of their big problems on this team is they have no wing scoring outside of their first line, and he was the one guy who was giving you that. And he's super young, only 23 years old. You can build around him. Same thing with like a DeBrincat situation. And they say, you know what, we're just going to off him. And obviously, you got a big haul for him. There's no doubt about that. But you also got 2 first-round picks that are 2 Tampa first-round picks, which those are going to probably be late in the draft if we're looking at it realistically. So you got essentially 2 high second-round picks for a dude that you could just build around in the first place and keep his great contract and then build and use that extra cap space, keeping a guy like that on the roster to bring in other guys around him. It just didn't make sense for me. Like it's nice to have a haul like that coming back, and a guy like Taylor Radish did have a good like stint there towards the end of the season. Hopefully, he's a guy we can build around. But you're essentially switching one young good winger for another young good winger, so it kind of didn't make sense for me. We'll see what they do with those draft picks, but I mean, yeah, it's puzzling. I hope the GM knows what he's doing for our sake, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the draft picks definitely are going to either make or break this deal for Chicago's end for sure. Tampa, they got Brandon Hagel on a great contract, so that's a win for them. So, guys, one of our favorite parts of the season recap is we like to go through and name our MVP from the team. So let's switch gears and let's get ready to name our MVPs. And Matt, I'll come back to you. Who do you got?
Well, my MVP is usually MVP for most of the seasons that he plays for this team, but I think very so this year, just for the fact that we were talking about outside of his line, nothing was happening. And you could say because of that, for Brinkett, but I think, in my opinion, I think it was Patrick Kane. I think the dude had a really good season this year. 92 points in 78 games is insane. I mean, the minus 19. I mean, what are you gonna do? The dude's playing 22 minutes a night. They're gonna give up goals every now and then when he's on the ice. And with a team this bad, that's just going to happen. But the dude, I think one thing that's been interesting to see about him each year is that when he first came into the league, he was a sniping, goal scoring, exciting young player. And now as he's getting later on in his career, he's learned to pass the puck pretty much. And he's been more of like a playmaking winger, one of the best playmaking winners in the league, arguably. And he's an exciting player, 33 years old, and he's still doing what he's doing now, which is just crazy. And he's a guy, free agent next year. I'm hoping they keep him, but you never know. But yeah, he definitely had another solid season that he can hang on his cap.
Yeah, Patrick Kane, no doubt. No signs of slowing down, even at the age of 33. Super exciting for anyone to watch, not just us Hawks fans. So Jake, let's come over to you. Who is your MVP?
You know what a goalie's least favorite shot is? one that comes off the stick of Alex DeBrincat. That man is so good at shooting the puck, and especially on a team that did not do very well. He still put up 41 goals and 37 assists. 41 goals is nothing to scoff at. That the league had higher scoring than usual this year, but that still puts him 13th in the entire league for scoring on a team that finished way toward the bottom. So I think that it makes absolutely no sense to get rid of this guy because he's one of the few bright spots that you have left. And as I mentioned earlier, with how excited fans were about last season, the more you build up your fans, the further they have to go down when you don't meet expectations. So do what you can as management of the Blackhawks. Keep the bright spots of this team, especially when I think they wanted Seth Jones to be a bright spot. He put up a lot of points, but he isn't that game changer that they were looking for. But Alex DeBrincat, this is Alex DeBrincat's league, and everybody else is playing in it.
Yeah, Jake, I have to agree. My MVP for the season is Alex DeBrincat for all of the same reasons that you just mentioned. The goal scoring, absolutely phenomenal. He's one of the young superstars in the league. And like you said, it doesn't make much sense for the Hawks to be looking to ship him. So on that note, let's transition to part 2, the offseason analysis. And let's get right on that topic of Alex DeBrincat because there's a lot that we could talk about. Young superstar, you would think that the Hawks would want to build around a guy like him, but they're taking calls on him. A couple first-round picks and a top prospect were not enough to get the deal done. So obviously the GM's not just going to let him go. So that's good news for Hawks fans. But why in the world are they even trying to trade him? What are your guys' opinions on that? And Matt, I'll come to you here.
I don't know. To be honest with you, it's weird. I've never understood the philosophy of Kyle Davidson so far for this team. I mean, so far he's kind of been a guy who's like, off the young guys. We're gonna build around our 35-year-olds and bring in prospects from the draft. It just doesn't make much sense to me at this point. Like with a guy like Alex DeBrincat, I agree with Jake 100%. You got to build around a guy like that. And as much as Patrick Kane's a beast, he's 33 years old. I mean, is he really a guy you're gonna build around? I don't know. I mean, it really depends on how many years he has left. And you're not going to build around Jonathan Toews based on what he did this year. So it's Alex DeBrincat and it's nobody else. So and it's not Seth Jones. You cannot say it's Seth Jones because I'm sorry, but like with that type of cap, that type of hit, and with the performance that he had, he can't do it by himself. But a guy like Alex DeBrincat can single-handedly win you games in overtime, or he can go up the ice and just do it by himself. He's an amazing player. And it just doesn't make sense. I don't think there's any package that makes sense. They could bring back 4 young wingers and 4 first-round picks and still wouldn't make sense because there's another thing too. These draft picks, you don't know what you're getting with them. With a guy like Alex DeBrincat, we know at this point what you're getting with them. But with these draft picks, it's scary. And if you're just offering them for a bunch of draft picks, I don't know. It's just the direction just doesn't make sense. And I hope that Davidson clears it out soon, but I guess we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Jake, what do you think on the matter? Do you agree with Matt here?
Yeah, and one thing that I think you have to look at when you mentioned that a couple first-round picks and a prospect wasn't enough, if that was, say, a Central Division team or even a Western Conference team, maybe the Blackhawks say no because they know how good he is and they don't want him in that division. They don't want to see him. So maybe if an Eastern team puts up a similar package, it could get done there. So you have to be mindful of that. But I don't think it's a good idea to trade him to either division. I say you keep him on your team and re-sign him, most importantly.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So if the Hawks do keep him and re-sign him, what kind of deal do you think he could potentially get?
I think it's his contract to negotiate. So you have Toews coming off the books. I think he could honestly ask for $9 million at least and get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I wouldn't be shocked at all if he got 10. To be honest, with the production that he has had at this point in his career, and he has had no issues continuing to score 40+ goals each season. So, yeah, I think that would be very reasonable. And if the Hawks can get him at 10 or less, that's an absolute win. Matt, what about you? What do you think that DeBrincat could be looking to get?
Yeah, I think north of 9 is definitely in the discussion, and it's something. If he asks for anything, the Hawks sign it. I think I agree with Jake. It's his contract. If he wants to resign, you resign him. You don't trade him. You resign him at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right, fellas. So we're all in agreement here that DeBrincat should be staying in Chicago if Chicago is wanting to do this rebuild correctly, and somewhat quickly to try to start winning soon. But along with DeBrincat, there's other things that need attention this offseason, and that's some key RFAs. Kirby Doc, Dylan Strom, Dominic Kubalik, and Caleb Jones. What do you guys think of those RFAs? Who's the priority here? Who should be potentially leaving?
If Matt's okay with me going first here, I just want to say I like Kirby Doc. I think that he has so much potential, but it seems like the highlights you see on Kirby Doc are either him doing this fantastic deke or him getting run over. There's no in between. And I think that he needs some consistency. And I think he still has all the pieces he needs to be a great player and a top 6 forward. But as of this season, we're not seeing it yet.
Yeah, not even close. Not the production that you would like to see out of a player who's drafted 3rd overall at this point in his career. But in addition to Kirby Doc, Jake, obviously you think that he should be coming back. Matt, what do you think about Kirby Doc at this point?
I think at best you qualify him. I think when you look at what sucks with him is that I think him breaking his wrist the season before really hurt his development. He was coming off looking for a good sophomore season, breaks his wrist and playing for Team Canada, and then it seems like he's never been the same after that. He had a decent rookie year. He comes back from the lineup this year and he's just meh at best. Like I think what epitomized him this season was the play against Colorado early in the year where Cal McCarr just completely undressed the man, did a 180, went around him, and he was just lost. Had no idea what he's doing, like he'd never seen a move like that before, and just let him walk in on the goaltender. That can't happen. I get he's more of an offensive playmaking type center, but with a dude standing right there, you got to make a play. And it pretty much epitomized the season because it was one of, if he was stuck by himself, he was going to get beat on defense. And I think another thing too is for a playmaker has to be able to score too, to at least show some type of threat. And one thing that he had issues with is if it was a 2-on-1 going the other direction and he was leading the breakout, he was going to pass. The goaltender could literally be giving him a wide open net and he would still pass. And that was the big issue with him is it just seemed like he was scared to shoot this year. He just didn't have that many shots this season compared to the other forwards, and he played about the same amount of minutes. And that just showed on the ice. The dude was just pass first. I don't know if that was a coaching thing or what, but it's something he's definitely got to look forward to. I think you qualify him, obviously. Don't do another pure Suter situation. I think you do qualify him, see if like anybody wants to overpay for him, you can get some compensation. But if he's cheap, bring him back. But I don't know. He's not worth a huge contract to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about another RFA here. Dylan Strom. He had a slow start, like you said, Matt. Scratched by Coach Colleton, and then Coach King puts him back in the lineup, and he does fantastic with Kane and DeBrincat. So, again, DeBrincat is crucial for the Hawks because he's great friends with Dylan Strom. So if DeBrincat leaves, Strom probably doesn't want to come back, and that is supposed to be your center for the future. At least that's what it would seem. So what's Dylan Strom's situation looking like, and what do you guys think might happen with him?
I mean, I don't know what their thoughts are in Chicago, but me personally, he was a 3rd overall pick at one point, and I don't think he hasn't given us he hasn't proven that he can be a top 6 guy even, but he hasn't shown enough bad to not keep signing him and keep him on this team, because I think he's a type of player where if you trade him and you give him a new environment, you might look really bad later if he does end up reaching his potential with a different team.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what are your thoughts on Dylan Strom?
He's a weird one. More so than anything anybody else on this roster, you kind of have the pegs on what type of play style and what type of performance you're going to get from him. With a guy like him, when he's playing with Kane and DeBrincat, which most people can play with Kane and DeBrincat and have good seasons. It seems like he really broke out this year when they put him on the line, stopped scratching him, which was big, and put him back in the lineup. and he was playing amazing. Like I remember late in the season, he had a hat trick in a game and had 5 points, and the line went off. And the dude had a really good year. But then you look at it, and they're playing whenever they play him on like a third line or they're trying to like throw him on the wing. I've seen before in the past. He's just not nearly the same player. It kind of just seems like if he's not playing with those two, he's not going to give you great production, which is scary, especially when, like Jake said, if you're looking to trade a guy like DeBrincat, then I mean that pretty much spells the end, you'd think. But I don't know. It really just depends. Can he play with a guy like Kane and not have to have a guy like DeBrincat? Is what's going to be big for him. Can he play with Kane and they bring in another forward if they really are hell bent on trading a guy like Alex DeBrincat and moving up another forward like a Kubalik if they re-sign him, or like a Radish or somebody up and play with them? Can he give you that same production as if he were to bring it? That's huge, and that's something they got to look forward to and figure out if they do want to give him an extension.
Yeah, that could work in favor for the Hawks too when it comes to contract negotiation, because if you only show success in one element of your game, the GM is going to have a little more leverage when it comes to your paycheck. So one more player I want to talk about here. Actually, there's two. There's two players I want to talk about. We mentioned him earlier. That's Kevin Lankinen. Another one is Caleb Jones. When it comes to those two, how big are they on the priority list? And Caleb Jones, not just for the sake that he's Seth Jones' brother, but Caleb Jones, low-key, had a pretty good season with Chicago. Could he earn a spot playing top 4 defensive minutes? So let's talk about Kevin Lankinen and Caleb Jones. Jake, I'll come back to you here.
So I said it earlier. I think Lankinen is a great goalie. I think he already knows the system. I think if he's willing to come back after you did him a little dirty, I think you bring him back. He won't be that expensive. And as far as Caleb Jones goes, I think that he's there more so as a package deal with Seth Jones. But I think he'll remain a top 6 guy. I don't see him getting any better than a top 6 guy.
Matt, how about you?
I mean, I think Caleb Jones is obviously the more important guy here. I think Caleb Jones, you got to look at it from this year. He had just as many goals as Seth Jones did, which is kind of crazy to think about. And he played 10 less minutes of ice time. They didn't even play him on the power play either, which was interesting. So, like, he was getting those goals on 5-on-5. I think he's an underrated offensive defenseman to look for in the future. And you're going to be able to get him for cheap, too, because he didn't play much. So he doesn't have much leg to stand on when it comes to negotiations. So you're going to be able to get him for cheap. And a guy like Lankinen, I just don't know. It seems like you give him the reins in the pandemic year, and he was really good. He was really good for most of the season. Surprised a lot of people with how well he played. And it seemed like towards the end of the season, he kind of ran out of gas. And the more they played him, the worse he played. And I think that spells backup goaltender to me. And the problem was, too, is that it kind of seemed like he plays like a backup where in spots he can be great. But then when you bring in a guy like Fleury, it hurt his confidence and he played even worse. So it was kind of weird. It was like he didn't understand his own role. And I don't know if he's a goaltender you can build around. They have a couple of young goaltenders they can build around in the future. Maybe you bring him back on like a bridge just to kind of like set up for those young goaltenders. But I think right now he's not a guy you throw $4 or $5 million at and say, hey, you're our starting goaltender. I just don't think that's a thing.
Yeah. Do you have any goalie prospects in mind in Chicago's system that could potentially step up?
I think definitely Drew Comiso. He was a dude in the shortened time that he got to play for Team USA. He showed amazing flashes for the team. I know he had a shutout in their first game of the tournament. Obviously, they only played a couple games, and then you know what happened with the COVID situation. But he's a really good goalie prospect, and in his league, his U.S. Development League, he was really good last year as well. So I think he's a guy you look forward to. He's only 19, so obviously with goaltenders, it takes longer for them to get ready. But he's a guy that I think eventually it really depends on when he's ready. Whenever he's ready, you bring him up and you plan. I think that's the big thing right now. And like we were saying with Lankinen, maybe like a bridge guy ahead of him to make sure he gets that development he deserves. Because if you bring him up now with this team at 20 years old, he's going to get rocked. It doesn't matter. And like you can't put him up again with that defensive group in front of him and expect him to play well. So I think it's just really about continuing his development and then move on from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts about the offseason for Chicago before we move into part 3, which is next season's preview?
I think a lot of this offseason is going to depend on if they trade DeBrincat, they're obviously going into a full-on rebuild. So they probably don't re-sign guys like Lankinen. But if they do keep DeBrincat, maybe they don't go as heavily into the rebuild as it seems. So I think it ultimately depends on DeBrincat will show us which direction the team's going in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is going to be crucial for Chicago as this offseason continues. All right, so with that note, fellas, let's head into part 3 here and look towards next season. Where do you guys think Chicago can finish? Obviously, DeBrincat impacts a lot of that, but what are your thoughts if he stays or if he goes? Jake, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think DeBrincat stays. I think the GM's going to get run out of town really quick if they trade him. And I just think it's too big of a move too soon into his tenure with the Blackhawks.
So where do you think that they would finish, speaking that they keep DeBrincat?
So I think that they finish ahead of Arizona. So they're not only going to have more points than Arizona, they're going to have an arena to call their own. So you've got that going for you. Other than that, I don't see them doing much higher. I think that DeBrincat is a question mark, but adding pieces is out of the question. So they're not going to get better, and they're going to be about the same, which is about 7th in the Central.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with him. If you bring back DeBrincat, it's kind of going to be the same status quo, and that means you're probably going to bring like you said, in a guy like Kevin Lankinen, and it's pretty much going to feel like he did last year towards the end of the season, which they were losing a lot towards the end of the season. So, and not adding pieces, unless you have like a Herculean effort from a guy like Jonathan Toews, like all of a sudden he's back to being pre-illness Jonathan Toews, and you have like an amazing season from a guy like Taylor Raddysh. There's a lot of question marks with this roster, and that's why it's hard to rank them. I mean, you can rank them ahead of Arizona because, well, Arizona, but at that point, it's hard to rank them ahead of anybody else in the Central. Central is just too much of a bloodbath for you to realistically have them beating any of them in the standing.
Yep, I agree with you guys. Probably going to finish ahead of Arizona unless Arizona makes some huge moves, but I just don't see that happening quite yet for them. So any other thoughts with Chicago before we wrap up this video?
Yeah, so earlier I mentioned that, or we mentioned that I'm a Blues fan. And so if fans are looking at this and saying, that's a Capitals jersey, I just want to explain. I'm a Blues fan first, and my second favorite team is the Capitals, and my third favorite team is whoever's playing against the Blackhawks.
Awesome. We love to hear it, but we appreciate the honesty. All right, fellas. Hey, thank you all for tuning into this video. Let us know in the comments below what you think is going to happen with DeBrincat and ultimately the Chicago Blackhawks this upcoming season and for the near future. We'll see you next time on Winamac Hockey. Hey everybody, welcome back to Winamac Hockey. Today we're drinking soda and talking hockey. Okay.